And
Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
sorry.
I lost my screen, my view. It's not what I wanted either. Oh, there we go.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Smith, Florida Literacy Coalition. It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to our webinar, Enhancing Reading and Writing Skills Through Text Structures. We're pleased to have Harold Gertner as our presenter today. Harold is an adult education and career pathways and instructional specialist at Santa Fe College in Gainesville. He has over a decade of experience in adult education and is presented at several state and national conferences on best practices in adult education. And he's also a trainer, a regular trainer with IPDAY. We've had him present to us both webinars and at our conference in the past, always very well received. Harold is a lifelong learner, as his 3 master's degrees attest, and he encourages this attitude toward education in all that he does. So we're very pleased to have Harold with us this afternoon. This session is brought to you, of course, by FLC through the support of the Florida Department of Education. So we want to thank them for helping us to make this possible. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Harold. I'll just mention that if you do have questions, feel free to add them to the chat. And we do have a survey at the end that we'll be posting in the chat as well that will ask you to complete an evaluation for the session. So Harold, take it away.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you, Greg. And thanks for having me today, everyone. And as always, I love being a part of anything the Florida Literacy Coalition has going on. And so this is a great opportunity to participate with some trainings with y'all again. So thank you. And yeah, welcome everyone. Please, as Greg mentioned, as we're going along, if you have a question, add it to the chat. And I'd like to take those kind of in the midst of the presentation so we can talk about them when they're most pertinent. But of course, at the end, we can take additional questions as well if you don't feel comfortable. I don't want to say interrupting because I want you to interrupt. That sounds negative. But anyhow, this hopefully will be a little bit of an interactive session today as we work through things. So the title of the session is Enhancing Reading and Writing Skills Through Text Structures. And hold on, I'm just shrinking. There we go. I wanted to shrink the view of everyone just a little bit for myself here. Yeah, so let's just get right into what I mean by that. I think everyone here hopefully knows what we mean by text structures, but I've got a slightly different approach to using them, hopefully, that you'll enjoy implementing with some of your students. So let's see here. There we go. So what I want to do today is talk about using text structures as a guide to boost reading comprehension instead of as the more traditional pattern for teaching writing skills. And so what we're going to try and do is talk about using basically increasing reading comprehension and critical thinking by encouraging active reading, which we'll define again together in a moment. And hopefully this will improve engagement with the texts, enhance the students' understanding, make them a little more critical about what they're reading while they're reading it. And then when it comes time to actually write, be ready for writing in maybe a better way than they were if they were just introduced these structures as a writing tool instead of already as a structure they're familiar and working with and kind of looking for in written passages. Okay, so that's kind of a quick overview of where we're going, I guess. Let's talk a little more about it though. So when I mean text structures, I'm not talking about the 5-paragraph essay kind of text structure. I'm talking more about when you're writing in a descriptive passage, or your compare and contrast essays, cause and effect, problem solution, sequence, these sorts of things. And I'm sure you work on some of these with your writing students, your reading and writing students already. And you probably start with a very basic description of each, something like this, like a descriptive or explanatory passage might just do just that. It might just describe things exactly as they are, explain something, very much like a encyclopedia or a dictionary, right? Give you the yeah, not the definite, well, yeah, the definition of it in terms, and more details to that if needed. And then, of course, compare and contrast. You're talking about similarities, things that are similar and things that are different. And often you may talk about this as a writing tool, as a way to compare and contrast. In terms of a lot of what I do on the GED, that's looking at two different essays or two different authors' arguments, or that sort of a compare and contrast. And you may even use visuals to discuss that. Like sometimes you use a Venn diagram or a T diagram to talk about compare and contrast. Well, we're going to talk about using it as a guide that we're looking for in the reading passages that we're working through. All right. Cause and effect. We've got things that are just like, y'all all know this. One event leads to other events, or multiple events lead to a single event. This can be different patterns of cause and effect. And of course, we can always throw in a fun little conversation about causation versus correlation in there if you've got some advanced students. But that's not necessarily part of your reading structure, obviously. Problem solution, another common writing structure, right? Here's a problem we need to address. What are one or more solutions to solve this problem? Again, what if we looked at that from a guide as to how to stay actively engaged with a passage while we work through this piece of reading, piece of material, then instead as a guide to write from is what we're going to look at in a second. Anyhow, and sequence, which often can also be called chronological, right? But doesn't always have to be time ordered. Sequence could be things like a recipe, where you have to do the events in a certain order to get the cake to come out right, but it's not based on time in terms of years or hours in the day, or it's not chronological in that sense, right? So these are some of the basic structures that hopefully y'all are all familiar with and probably already work with your students in some degree, that I'm suggesting we use to help our students engage more deeply as readers. Okay, and so what are we talking about really is another way of encouraging active reading, right? And so active reading is that, as it says, I have here, the purposeful engagement with a text, right? I bet we've all, and if we were in a room, I'd say, let's get a show of hands out there. I bet we've all read a page in a book or a magazine or something, maybe a book for pleasure, maybe a textbook, where we started at the top and we got to the bottom and had no idea what we read, right? And that's because we were passively reading. We read every single word in every sentence, and it just went in one side of our brain and right back out the other, because we weren't really engaging with the text. And over time, either through practice or because someone gave us specific tools, we all had to learn to be active readers in order to, if nothing else, engage with our academic materials to get the degrees to then come and teach other students these necessary skills. And so active reading is really engaging more with the text while you're reading. And there's a variety of techniques and tools that you can use to be a more active reader. And my suggestion is that kind of awareness of structure in a passage can be a great way for students to become active readers, and essentially become kind of detectives while they're reading, guessing at what structure might best fit the passage that they're about to read as a pre-reading tool, kind of as I have here, and then using it as a guide while reading, and then also as a time to reflect after reading. What okay, I've got a question here. Ah, yes, so you're right. I agree. It's not really a question. I should have brought up this chat first, but that's a great comment. Yeah, I think there's a lot of distractions today, and I think even all of us here have probably felt that to where at sometimes active reading gets even a little bit more difficult. Certainly, if you take a little break and you've been doing a little too much short reading on your phone, like a little too much Reddit or I don't know what anybody's kind of social media, or it doesn't even matter what your social media is. Any of the news feeds out there, if you're reading them on your phone, it's typically very short form. Maybe you're just getting the title in a short little, shorter than an abstract would be in a scientific paper kind of study summary, right? Um, and so you really students who have never really had that engagement maybe or really struggle with forcing the active reading beyond the 2 second quick engagement with the quick internet world, right? The quick online technology world. And we are going to read online, and I do have some ways to try and engage the students with the phone a little bit so it's there at their side, but they won't be uh, sneaking away and looking on other things online. They'll be actually hopefully engaged in the course. But thanks. I hope this does work as a good mental structure to help simplify a more complicated text, as you noted. I think it will. And so we'll kind of reflect on these things, like I said beforehand, as a pre-reading tool based on the title of the passage or the context in which we find a certain article. What might we guess an author might use? What structure might they use to best fit that setting? Then while we're reading, we're going to first kind of look to confirm, is that what we're looking, were we correct in our guess? And if not, no worries, we'll discover what pattern the author did use and use that as a guide through the reading. And then when we're done, kind of reflect on how well that structure played out, or was it the best tool for the author to use this in this situation? What other structure could we have used? Those kinds of things. So hopefully this can be a guide throughout the reading process, kind of an active reading tool. Oh, whoops, I went backwards. There we go. So a pre-reading tool. I kind of started to explain this already, but the idea is basically to consider the general subject area that the text is that you're presented with, and think what structures might be most common in this subject area or discipline. And you can kind of think of some ideas right now, maybe as you think of things you normally read or things you normally use in class, and think of some of the kinds of structures they might follow. But we're going to put this into practice here in just a second. Another great next step after you've kind of thought about the general subject area is think about the specific article or book or whatever you're getting into, magazine, right? What's the specific passage title hint at? What's it say the structure that's coming might be? Okay. And then as we start to read, we kind of transfer from this pre-reading tool into more of an active engagement with the passage as we look to confirm or deny or disprove, I guess, our guess, kind of like a scientific experiment. We're looking to prove or disprove our hypothesis, right? And with many things, it doesn't kind of like a scientific experiment, we'll learn something whether we were right or wrong. If we think that a compare and contrast structure is coming and we confirm that that's the case, great, we were right, we know what to follow, we've got kind of our transition words in mind, and we can work our way through the passage pretty easily, hopefully. If we were wrong and we start to see a different pattern, Well, sometimes in learning something different or wrong or different than what you can expect makes it sink in even deeper. Well, here's a new pattern we hadn't thought of that might fit this type of context or this type of passage or this type of goal that an author might have. So we can kind of learn either way, right? And of course, then we can learn to be more critical about, well, which one was best or which passage might be better. And that just takes our students thinking a little bit further to the next level. So let's let's do this a little bit. So what I like to do is, as much as possible, use kind of just regular websites when appropriate to encourage the students to read things at in a general way that they might encounter in the regular world, and also to remind them that there's things on the internet other than social media and YouTube videos and such. So we've got, I often use articles from This Day in History from history.com. Nature is a great magazine as well, and Science News, just a daily science news magazine, are good general sites that aren't too high a difficulty level reading. You can always do these same kinds of things with sites that are a slightly lower difficulty level as well, or use some sites like Newsy LA, like Newsella, or something similar where you can change different levels, or Reading Works where you can get articles at a variety of different levels. I'm not really promoting any specific thing here. This is just exactly what I do with my students. And often we'll go to the site and let them choose what we're going to read. And so uh, let's see, what else was I going to add? Oh, a few things. There are other great science magazines out there. Some of the things like Popular Science gets a little too commercial. They're just trying to sell you gadgets, and it's all like reviews of the best new gadget. So it's not always the best. And some other things on the other extreme get a little too intense and sciencey for my level students typically. Every once in a while, we'll dive into one of those, and all we'll read is like the abstract of a real formal scientific research paper, or the introduction and conclusion of an article without the real detailed methods, and just try and really challenge our skills for a day. But back to the moment at hand, we're going to click on a couple of things here and read and then discuss what kinds of structure we might expect based on reviewing nothing other than the title and maybe the little summary they give us with the title of some of these articles. So let's go to This Day in History first. And here we are, October 22nd, This Day in History. And we've got the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, now if y'all haven't been here before, there's always a big article at the top of the page, and then there's a series of other articles down below. Sometimes there's as few as just like 4 or 5 articles. Sometimes there's a good bit. This is kind of a medium level amount. Sometimes there's twice as many as this, and that's a little towards the higher end. Low system, okay. Try closing some apps. Are y'all able to, hold on. There, I don't need the video. I don't know, maybe that's messing it up. But what I might, oh yeah, News for You is good. Exactly, thank you, Greg. How did I skip that one? News for You is a great one for new readers, and we use that here as well with some of our new readers. Excellent, thanks for adding that to the chat. But here, we might just look at this. We're on a history site. Let's start with the big article. JFK's address on the Cuban missile crisis shocks the nation. Well, what kind of a passage or structure might we expect out of this? What either paragraph by paragraph or the overall structure of the whole thing? Anybody have any thoughts they can add in the chat, or even unmute and share? What might you think? Did this share through? Hold on. Yeah, that's what I just realized. I was about to ask. You're not able to see the website. I think I accidentally, hold on, I'm sorry. I think I shared in Zoom. Hold on, sorry, y'all. We need to share the whole page. Oh, I know where I am. Okay, here we go. Share. I'm going to share again. Let me share my entire screen. Sorry about that. I shared just the app. Okay, let's get back to where we were. It wouldn't be a good webinar without at least one little hiccup, right? Okay, here we are. Now this is what, now you're able to see it, right? Hopefully. So this is the history.com, this day in history. And yes, great. All right. Sorry for the trouble. Here we are. So at the top of the page, there's the kind of main article for the day. I don't know how they decide that, but it's always what's pretty much the most prominent issue. Sometimes there's other pretty important issues down below, however. But some things, you may agree or disagree as to how important a piece of history they are, but they can jog the interest of students. And so, as you see here, we've got the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK addressing the nation about it. We've got something about Lance Armstrong losing his titles in the Tour de France. Some European history, the first parachute jump ever made. Let's see, the Beautification Act signed into law. Peace proposal turned down in Vietnam. So a good variety, even some crime thrillers, right? Everybody likes true crime these days. And so depending on what's on here, sometimes I'll try and guide the students a little bit to a certain article, but usually I'll try and let them choose, or a couple students vote on it, basically, whoever's super interested to vote. So back to what we were doing just a moment ago, though. Once we choose one, we might discuss what kind of structure we're going to expect as a way to kind of engage with the article and do that little pre-reading before we even get started. So if we're looking here at JFK's address on the Cuban Missile Crisis shocks the nation, before we even open it up, what kind of a structure might we expect? Anybody have any thoughts or guesses they might want to add to the chat bar? Well, okay, descriptive, informative, exactly as we might expect from any history piece, or kind of encyclopedic kind of a piece. I agree. Excellent. Any other thoughts? What about chronological? Not all history passages have to be chronological, but I can imagine this might be a series of events within a handful of days. What happened throughout the missile crisis, and how did JFK handle it at each point, or something of that nature, right? Um, could be, could be some compare and contrast between how JFK handled this and how other presidents handled something similar. I kind of doubt that. That might be a little stretch. I don't know. Um, what else? One other one that's really jumping out in my head that the students might pull out, I think, too, that we might see. Oh, I hear someone. Is someone? Oh, that's me talking. Sorry. I'm someone in the office next door. Little thing. Um, Problem solution, right? Here's this huge problem, these missiles in Cuba. How did JFK address or solve the problem, right? All right. Well, we'll return to that later. We'll think a little bit more about it and come back. Let's just look at a few others. Um, Lance Armstrong stripped of his 7 Tour de France's. Ooh, that feels like could be a problem solution, could be a cause and effect, right? Kind of depends on what's going on there. Um, Something like that. I don't know. Let's see. What else might be an interesting one? Here we go. The Beautification Act. What kind of a passage do you think we might get with President Lyndon Johnson signs the Highway Beautification Act? Well, part of it was going to be descriptive. What was the act? When was it signed, right? But another major part of any of that is going to be, yes, why was it signed? Why was it made? What's the problem solution situation, right? And unfortunately, I think we're right back where Lyndon Johnson didn't want to be, where our beautiful highways are cluttered with ads and such, right? Billboards everywhere. But yeah, he had a problem and saw this act as a solution to try and help preserve the beauty of nature and keep Americans connected to the idea of the wilderness that exists around us and such. Excellent. All right. So y'all are getting the idea a little bit here. Let's go back to, hold on. Let's take just a quick look at a few nature articles and see what we might expect. All right. Ah, okay. Brain stimulation at home helps to treat depression. A device that delivers a small electrical current to the brain has beneficial effects in the cases of depression that doesn't respond to drugs or therapy. Okay, so what do you think we might get here? What kind of a pattern or structure? Cause and effect? Excellent. Yeah. What's the effect of this stimulation on the brain? That's definitely going to be part of what's going on. I was also thinking probably some compare contrast, right? How does this therapy compare to the drugs or talk therapy is probably what they mean here with drugs or therapy, right? So how does this brain stimulation compare and contrast with these other approaches, right? Let's see what else we've got here if we can find another obvious different passage. Ah, well, here we go. Record-breaking magnet. China builds record-breaking magnet, but it comes with a cost. What might we expect there? If it's record-breaking, we have to compare it to something that wasn't record-breaking, right? So definitely should be some compare and contrast in there. Maybe a little problem solution at the end with now we've got this cost we've got to figure out what to do about. I don't know. Wow, that's an interesting title. Researchers scanned herself 75 times. Um, so again, another, just a different topic here, but more a similar pattern thing. How does the brain react to birth control? Well, that's a clear problem solution, you could say. Here's the question or problem is how does it react? Well, I don't know, that's not quite right. But I bet there's some problem solutions in there. They probably found something that they don't like so much, maybe, or I don't know. Maybe I'm guessing too far. But you can get kind of how the process goes and how it might go with students. Oh, here's a definite disruptive climate protest work. Well, a real-time survey means we definitely have something to compare and contrast, probably. How did the I don't know. We'll have to get a little deeper into that one. But yeah, did people's day being interrupted by road closure affect? That'd be hard to connect. I don't know. That might be interesting to read to see what they tried to do. But these first couple, we got some good examples out of it here. And again, we could do the same with science, and we may jump in the science news for one of our examples a little later on. But hopefully you get the idea of what we mean by using this as a pre-reading tool. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to do is start to try and use it as a reading tool for real engagement on our way through the text. Okay, and whoops, I was just trying to change the size of you over here on the side. But and so one way to do that is to remind our students there are certain words that signal these different types of patterns. And so this is a great place. Yeah, here we are. Okay. So this is a great place to review some of those words and some of those patterns and things that transitional phrases that go with each pattern, like descriptions, for example, for instance, that is, such as, compare and contrast, similarly, likewise, by the same token, or however, in contrast, on the other hand, cause and effect, therefore, consequently, as a result, because of, thus. Now, a few can be a little tricky, right? Because problem solution could also be because, or since, or due to. Sequence, before, after, first, second, third, things like that. Or actual dates can help us, and or times can help us find sequence, right? So I feel like I missed, oh yeah, I did kind of lose track of a page there as I zipped by. Sorry, trying to get the chat situated. Um, but the goal here is that now, instead of, which I know y'all probably have students that read kind of word for word or even just sentence by sentence if they're a little bit better than word by word. Well, hopefully now they're starting to engage and think about the whole passage because they're trying to follow this pattern or trying to be little detectives of sorts as they read, right? Because you're either searching for the pattern you think's coming, or searching for a new pattern, or you're confirming what you thought was there. And you're using these transitional words and phrases that we were just discussing as the kind of same way we might have taught those before as little breadcrumbs to guide you through a passage, but instead of finding them and then guessing the passage they go with, now you've got a passage or a structure in your brain that you're matching them to. A slightly different approach. And hopefully that leads to a deeper comprehension because they're adding to something they're already thinking about instead of trying to figure out what's going on while they're in the midst of the paragraph. And as I mentioned, here are some of those transitional phrases. I accidentally got a little out of review there. So let's jump a little deeper into one of those articles we chose and see what we can find. Let's go back to the day in history for a second here. And let's go ahead and jump into the JFK article just to right off the bat to see what we've got. We looked at that one a little bit and we said that we expected maybe some sequence or chronological order, passage structure, maybe some problem solution, right? I think those are the kind of two top ones. Oh, and informative. That of course it's going to be a historical event, so it's going to be informing us about something. And generally, when I talk about that with students, the main point is it's informing us about something without any obvious bias, right? There's no real goal to persuade what we think about the topic, just the information. And that's the case with the history, day in history page here on history.com. They don't have an obvious bias behind why they're trying to get us to read or a certain article or agree with a certain point of view or anything like that. So anyhow, here we are. Let's skim it. We probably don't need to read the whole thing, but I bet y'all can skim pretty quickly with me here and see that we're talking about, he announced something. Yeah, so he's announcing it. He's having a speech. What is known actually began on October 14th. The next day, he convened a meeting. After rejecting some ideas, he did something else. On the 22nd, during the next 6 days, right? On the 23rd, by the 24th, right? So we are getting a good example of, and here we keep going, the 25th, so we've got actual days, but then mixed in the same day, the next day. So we're getting a good mix of a sequence, chronological order, just like we were hoping to find. We're finding it mixed in here with what we're reading, and it makes it a little easier to guide with what we're doing. Now, just so you know, this is one of the longer passages I've seen on this day in history. They're usually a good bit shorter than this, but this was obviously a pretty big event in U.S. history. And in case it's not obvious, I'm doing this just like I would with the students. I just pulled this up with y'all and said, let's see what's here for this day in history. So it doesn't always work out perfectly. And sometimes you get a little longer passage than you planned on, but that just means you spend a little more time in that class period reading that, doing that part of your lesson for the day. Now let's see, we also thought it might be some problem solution. And if we look a little bit deeper, we do see that exact thing. Here's this action that the Soviets took that caused a problem for the United States, namely putting these missiles so close to the country, right? So close to Florida, really, if we're hitting it close to home with the students. And then it talks about the solutions that were shared. You had a part here where he said something about he rejected one solution and then after rejecting a surgical airstrike, so that would have been one possible solution. There were other ones given, right? And so again, you've got these two structures working here that the students can engage with while they're reading. How did Kennedy and the people he was working with solve this problem of the Soviets putting the missiles in Cuba, right? And yeah, let's jump into one. Whoops, that doesn't back up to it. Let's see if we can jump into one more, or maybe we should jump into a science one. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to science news. We didn't go there yet, and we'll see if we can find another article and just a similar sort of, we may not take the time to read the entire thing. With my students in class, and what I would suggest you do is take turns reading it. I don't force all students to read every class. Students can always say they'd like to pass, but if you've got a small group and they're willing to read and take turns together, reading out loud is a little different skill than reading quietly to yourself. And we just go paragraph by paragraph. And before we do a reading, I always remind all the students that to let me as a teacher help any students struggling over a word, because we're all learning to read, and some of these science articles have some pretty complicated words sometimes. And if we all try and help someone, they feel kind of attacked, even though we're trying to be helpful. And the students are always generally very respectful of all that and understand, and it works out to be a great little system. And most of the time, everybody ends up reading eventually, even if not on day one. And yeah, so that's how I would have worked through that specifically, is read, and we kind of analyze each paragraph as we go through it. But here we're on to science news, and we've got a variety of articles to choose from, and we can go ahead and try our process again. We've got the telescope spots the first known steam world. Okay. Right off the bat, I'm expecting some compare and contrast, because I have no idea what a steam world is, right? So hopefully they're going to give me some descriptive, but maybe compare and contrast that to Earth, the world I do know, right? Let's see here. Once weekly insulin might mean fewer shots for some diabetics. Okay, what might this go into? What sort of a pattern or structure might this article follow? I'm thinking problem solution, right? Yeah, exactly. Chronological, yes. Could be, or is that from before? I think that's problem solution. Yeah, could be chronological. I doubt it is, but it could be. That is before. All right. You never know, though. Sometimes with these articles, it could be the history of insulin and how it's delivered. The delivery has changed over time. I doubt it. I think you're probably right first with the problem solution guess, right? But you never know. And if students think one thing, you want to lean into how that could work, but how another thing might be the best or better structure to use, which is something we'll reflect on kind of at the end of our session today as a review of an article. Did the author use the best structure, or how might it have changed if they'd used a different structure, right? Here we go. How about this one? Mega fire smoke may dampen California's nut harvest. They don't have a solution yet, but they're figuring out the problem. So it's probably going to be more of a cause and effect sort of passage is what I would expect. Here we've found that this smoke is causing the trees to put out fewer nuts, or whatever or smaller nuts, or whatever the dampening or lessening of the harvest that's going on, right? Okay, and let's go ahead and jump in. Let's try that one. Let's jump in and see how they, or let's do the insulin since we had some interaction on that and thought. Let's see what we get here. So we're expecting problem solution. Let's open it up. Once weekly insulin might mean fewer shots for some with diabetes. Okay. Clinical research reveals the promise and challenges of weekly insulin shots over once daily. Okay, now are we expecting a different structure all of a sudden based on the extra little subtitle? Instead of problem solution, which there will be some of that, I agree, because we're still solving a problem for people with diabetes. Less needle sticks is less needle sticks. That sounds like a good thing. But yeah, maybe some cause and effect. Okay, maybe. What else? Yeah, compare, contrast. The promises and challenges, right? So what are the good things to come of this new research and this new approach? And what might be the bad things about it? I'm sure one of the good things is less needle sticks, but there might be something to the way the regulation works out over the week that doesn't work as well on a daily. Something more scientific about the functionality of it than just the physical avoiding more shots, right? So we have to find out. But yeah, we could get a compare contrast. Now let's see what they do. Let's get down into it a little bit. And this is a little small. Let me blow it up a little bit here for you. Okay, life with diabetes usually includes many injections of the blood sugar controlling hormone insulin. Recent research investigating a once weekly shot might help lessen the burden a bit. Okay, yeah, so there's some problem solution, kind of what we guessed might be coming. We're going to lessen the burden of having daily injections on the people that suffer with diabetes, right? Okay, now let's see what we've got going on a little further. Two pharmaceutical companies have developed weekly formulations and they're testing the drugs in late stage trials. Now, I'd obviously read this word for word slowly with the students, and we would, at the end of each paragraph, talk about any of the words we didn't understand or anything that's unusual. All right, so for adults with type 2, the drug worked as well as once daily, but for the adults with type 1, there were more episodes of dangerously low blood sugar. So we've got a compare and contrast going on, but it's not what we expected. I was expecting compare and contrast between the promise and the challenges, but really, and this is a little bit of that, but it's compare and contrast between the two different types of diabetes and how it works better, how it works for each one, which probably we could argue the promise is it works really well for one. The challenge is it doesn't work so great for the other yet, right? But, and you can see we could continue down with this and work our way through the whole passage. What is diabetes, how it's treated? Yeah, so a little informational, kind of descriptive. Yeah, but how would the once weekly be used? Okay, so that's going to get us a little more compare contrast again. How might the once weekly work differently than the once daily? At least that's what I might expect, right? All right, excellent. Let's leave that behind for a second here. All right, so what do I have next? Yeah, so kind of as you're working through this, the goal is to, as we mentioned before, make your students more active readers. And in doing that, you're also, there we go. You're also going to help them become more critical thinkers, better at analyzing what's going on with the passages and things that they're reading, which is ever more important in this world. Good question. No, I didn't mention that word earlier. But I'm gonna share it with the rest of the group if that's all right. There was a question in the chat about would there be any different instructional styles dealing with text structures and ESOL students versus native English speaking students. And yeah, I did not mention that, but I do have, I currently teach at Santa Fe in our adult ed program, some of the slightly higher level reading classes to get students ready for the GED. And typically that means students with like seventh, eighth, maybe ninth grade reading and math skills that are native English speakers, and students on the ESOL like level primarily 4 and 5 with some 3s mixed in. And in that case, I teach this pretty much the exact same way. They're all mixed in together. Of course, I'm more aware when the ESOL students are in the room about explaining, idioms or any unusual phrases or expressions that are mixed into things, which come up more often in the history articles, the This Day in History, than in the science articles, not surprisingly. Um, and and yeah. Um, Okay, excellent. Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad that makes sense. And thanks, Gonzola. I agree. I think the idea of using it as a mental routine before they read is kind of the one of the big pushes of what I'm trying to get across here. And you just put it together oh so much more eloquently than I've been doing. Exactly. That's what we want to do. And then use that to carry us through and kind of guide us through the passage, right? Um, and then as we're working through the passage, we're asking these things as we get deeper and deeper, and maybe not with this exact language, but the students are wondering, is this the proper structure? And does what I'm reading make sense? Does it follow the structure? Is it cohesive? Does it hold together? Right? Yeah, for sure. Kay and say, yes, I would use it with lower level students, just with, like you said, slightly lower level reading. The News for You that Greg mentioned earlier is great for that. Newsela, newsela.com is also great for that. It's news English language, like ELA and Newsela, some people say quickly. What you can do in there even is if you have mixed level reading, you can have one student on one computer reading an article on a certain level, another student on another computer reading that same article on a different level that's more appropriate for them, so they can then still both discuss some of the content at the end, even if they're engaging in it at, different difficulty levels. And the difficulty levels, things that change are length, complexity of structure and sentences, vocabulary, but the overall structures and things are the same, so that they're learning those base skills and they can still talk about things together. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You could use this at all levels. I agree. I was just trying to share kind of generally the group I have, and that makes for an interesting mix of adult ed and ESOL students because of where those two kind of levels work out, which
Errol.
makes it a really fun class too. But as we're reflecting on it and asking these questions, this is where the critical thinking and analysis come in. If the answer to any of these questions is no, or I'm not really sure, well, then how would we make it better? What would be a better structure? What would be a more appropriate way of organizing the passage? Or what would have been, as we get down here a little further in my questions at the bottom of the pink here, what would have been the necessary evidence to make this stronger? Or why is a piece of evidence not relevant or related to the argument? You can see I'm going a little beyond our main focus of today here, but I'm just trying to show you a little bit about how this could segue into some of those other discussions about evidence, fact versus opinion, author's point of view, and bias. Like once you understand the kind of the backbone, the structure, before reading and confirm it while reading, you can use that as a real nice jumping off point for a lot of these other discussions and analysis. And it gets students, I think, and hopefully you'll see that it happens, that they'll get more engaged and more importantly, even understand more what they're reading, which does lead to better engagement. I mean, often why people get annoyed or tired or don't like what they're reading is because they aren't engaging with it, and our students are just reading word by word or sentence by sentence, and yeah, that gets really terrible. It doesn't make sense. I wouldn't like reading like that either. But if they can engage with the overall thing, then we can have some move forward well, hopefully.
Harold,
So,
I had a question. Can you hear me?
yeah, so let's do that one more time, really briefly here. I guess to keep yeah, to keep things as they were, let's go back to the JFK article just to keep things simple and in a nice time frame here. We had the JFK article. We guessed that it might be explanatory or descriptive. Um, we guessed that it might be a problem solution situation, and we guessed that it might also be chronological, right? Okay. And then when we opened it up, we found that it was very descriptive, and we didn't read all of it really closely, but I can guarantee you there wasn't, just because I've done enough of them on this page, there wasn't any um, uh, JFK should or shouldn't have done this. It's more descriptive what happened and what people at the time might have reflected or thought on it, right? There was some chronological passage we saw very quickly as we went through with dates, just skimming. But then as we look just a little bit deeper, there were some nice phrases that gave us that sequence or chronology with language in addition to just dates. So that kind of confirmed what we were expecting. And it did seem that all the way through, it was like, here's a problem that was caused. The Russians put these missiles here. Here's a solution. Here's a couple of options. The missile strike solution. Well, we don't want to do that. Well, it's another solution to this problem. So it did kind of follow with what we were expecting. And I would argue and would discuss with the students that it seemed like those were probably the right kinds of structures for that. You could have had an article about the Cuban Missile Crisis, all about compare and contrast, how the Russian leadership and the US leadership handled the situation differently, or how the US handled that crisis and compared different to another crisis that was handled. But given the nature of the title and stuff, that wouldn't be what you would expect, and that would be a little unusual, right? So it makes sense, and it followed with what we expected, and hopefully the students would have engaged and deeply with the idea as they were working through it, right? Um, yeah, and so the other kind of the next step of this is that instead of just introducing these as individual, here's a transitional phrase to help you understand what's going on in and out of this one sentence, like sa da 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 da, however, blah 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 blah, right? Instead of just isolated transitional phrases like that, or instead of just introducing the structure of a pattern when it comes time to write your own essay, what if we introduced all those things earlier and had that be our reading support? Kind of like was mentioned earlier in the chat here, the establishing the structure before they start digging into the questions and before they start reading. And you kind of already have some questions in your mind that you're looking for answers. Let me look for some dates because I think it's going to be chronology, or let me look for these transitional phrases because I think it's going to be a problem solution, or whatever it is. And so a little fanciful here for the words and a nice metaphor, right? So instead of aimlessly wandering through a forest of words, hopefully they can kind of see the whole forest instead of just the trees kind of thing, right? Kind of the reverse of that statement sometimes. But yeah, so this is the goal, and I hope hopefully that's something that y'all helps you think about this in a slightly different different way than maybe you've been teaching it before, in a way that helps your students even more. And if there are any more questions and comments, I'd love to take them. Now, also, Greg mentioned here something that I have not done much with, but sounds like it probably would be fun. He says, I've talked with some instructors who have had success using ChatGPT or other AI tools to rewrite articles at a lower reading level. Have you tried this? I have not, as I said, but I think I might have to try it. That sounds pretty cool. Some of those tools are amazing. I do teach a CPR class with another instructor, and we're actually certified through the American Heart Association and all that, but then we offer it to our students as an extra bonus thing free of charge, just as part of our program. And we have many ESOL students that like to take that class. And the test at the end is unfortunately a little bit sneaky in terms of it's not just simply worded. Not that they're trying to trick anybody, but it's a little bit difficult. And so because we're not necessarily teaching English language in that class, we're teaching the content of CPR. We've started using the AI tools to translate the test into other languages. And it works amazingly well, just that quickly. Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Gonzalo. I'm glad. And I agree that it is better than just doing questions haphazardly. And I've found it to really help my students get a better a sense of what they're doing overall instead of feeling like they're learning little tiny pieces of information that don't connect. It's not, we're learning this big reading skill. And these are all the pieces that help it work well. So thank you. Good comment. Now, anybody that would like, again, there's my info. Please email me with any questions. It's just harold.gertner@sfcollege.edu. And I am going to share, I did make just a couple little changes to this before the session today. So I'll share the final PowerPoint with Greg and Stephanie, and they can share it out to everyone that was here today. But if you email me, I can also send that to you as well. And they also have a short survey that they'd like you to complete that's linked in the chat. And yeah, Kay, I'm glad you thought this will be helpful too. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
Okay,
All
well,
right.
thank you,
Well,
Harold.
thanks everybody for being here today. I'm not sure if Greg or Stephanie has anything else to add, but that's it for me. And
Okay,
I really appreciate you having me, and hopefully I'll be back for another session in the future.
thank you, Harold. Appreciate it. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Appreciate you all joining us, and thank you, Harold, for this session. Really gave us a lot of food for thought.
Great.
So I appreciate you all joining us today. I did want to just put on your radar, if you're interested, the Florida Literacy Coalition, and this is what a lot of what Harold was talking about was really contextualized learning, and we're big proponents of that here at FLC. And in that vein, we do offer some grants, and we have a grant opportunity that's out there right now to incorporate financial education or financial literacy into your adult education curriculum. And so that those grants are of up to $5,000, and the applications are due November 11th. So I just want to do a quick shout out on that. I just put a link in our chat to get more information about that opportunity. So with that, is there anything else we need to mention, Stephanie? Or are we good?
We have an online tutor training course going on
right.
for our fall semester. We can send out the registration link as well, but we recommend or encourage you guys to have your volunteers sign up and email me for any additional information.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everyone. You all have a good afternoon.
Take care.
Thanks
Thanks for your
again.
time.
Bye.